He is Senior Vice President, Worldwide Production at LIV Golf. James Watson is his name, and he joins me on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a golf broadcaster, work with different media outlets. And this is going to be an expose not only of what James and his great team at LIV Golf are doing and have done, but also a look at his personal life, which includes, James, as I welcome you on here, are you a piano player? I see the piano in the background.
I'm at my parent. Well, I'm at the family house in Melbourne, Australia. I don't play piano very well, but I think that's the one I attempted to play when I was a kid. But again, not well.
What was the one
But
song that you attempted to play the most when you were on the piano?
it's funny. I live in New York now, and it's fitting. I used to try to crank out Piano Man, but I get to the musical interlude in the middle of it that involved more than just playing chords, and I'd stumble. So I think I'm the kind of piano player that can get through about half of most songs, and then when it gets to the hard bit, I kind of stop, pretend I'll get back to it, and move on to something else. So luckily, that didn't transfer to my professional life.
It's an incredible professional life. And what most recently we all saw is the promotions event at Abu Dhabi Golf Club earlier this month in December. And you were on the director's chair and you had that responsibility. How was that, and how stimulating was that opportunity for you?
It was fun to get back into that. I mean, I've been really lucky in the 20 years or so I've been working in TV. I've worked across a number of different sports: golf, tennis, cricket. Produced a hell of a lot, directed a little bit. I spent 4 years in Asia working on the Asian Tour golf, mostly directing. So I did jump back into the chair as a bit of a cameo in Abu Dhabi. I think the comment to our brilliant executive producer Keith Hirschland was, "If someone gets sick, I don't want to feel rusty if I have to step in." But it was a fantastic event. I don't think anyone knew quite how that format would pay off. But there really is nothing like it. I mean, the idea of players having to get through a day, then there's a cut and a reset, and then they have to get through another day and a cut and a reset, and then 36 holes on Sunday with 3 spots in LIV Golf on offer. It was compelling, even if it was a slightly smaller production than we're used to rolling out on a week to week basis with LIV Golf.
The pressure that the players must have felt, considering the what was at stake. How does that pressure compare to the pressure that you have been under in terms of really putting together this great team and making sure that, in what you have already done, goes without saying, the forward thinking, like, broadcast property that you're putting out there?
Yeah, I think I've been really lucky. We've been able to build such a team of brilliant individuals who love golf and love production, and the idea of being presented with a blank canvas was just so compelling for all of us. I think from the outset we've been all in. I think one of the untold stories of LIV Golf is that first event we did in London 2022 was put together in less than 2 months notice. I mean, that was everything: broadcast facilities, crew, talent, graphics, look and feel. Oh, and by the way, try to innovate, try to come up with a new way of covering the sport. I know you had Keith Hirschland on recently, and he spoke about this idea that we're allowed to try things. And it's very true. We approached that week in London with a bit of an idea of how we wanted to approach changing a golf show structurally. Some things worked really well, other things didn't work so well, and we're able to move on. I think one of the great privileges we've been given with LIV is the privilege of a beta year, and having 2022 to try things when teams were changing, players were changing, new players are coming in, other players are departing. So when we kicked off the season proper at the start of this year, we feel like we were kind of firing on all cylinders from a production standpoint, having proven out the product that we wanted to put together in year one or in the beta year, and then being able to really hit the ground running when the league launched proper in 2023.
And when those broadcasts came out in 2023, and all of the newness that you're adding to these broadcasts, and so I'm looking at all these cool things that you're doing that haven't been done before. And let's just say imitation can be flattery, because you guys might have started something. Oh, that looks familiar, but from other places. But to be able to know that what you're doing is groundbreaking and it is being well received by those in the TV space, how does that validate this journey that you and the rest of Live Golf are on right now?
I don't think we've had time to stop and think about that kind of stuff. And it's funny when you say that. I mean, look, I will repeat something Keith said on your podcast the other day. There are no new ideas really. I mean, we're all trying things that in some way have been tried before. We're really lucky to work with David Hill, who is one of the foremost innovators in television, let alone sports production. And Will Steger, our chief media officer, and I sat down with David in a room, gosh, 2 years ago now. I was on at about 3 o'clock in the morning. We're on with Will, David, Greg Norman was there, and we were throwing ideas at the wall. Who do we want our announce team to be? What should the production be? And David really gave us a template to move forward with that he took from his own experience at Fox Sports. And when it came to innovation, he speaks about going to video arcades and watching kids play video games and taking ideas from kids playing Street Fighter on an arcade game with the clock at the top and the energy bar, because his whole thing was, how do you get viewers to lean in? And creating a lean-in viewing experience is the same as creating a video game. How do you draw people into the game? How do you draw people into a TV show? So he gave us, I guess, a way of thinking that he's proved out over the last 40 years of his career. And when we sat down and looked at creating this blank canvas and working on this blank canvas, it was really with his guidance that some of the ideas we came up with, whether it was me or Will or Keith or anyone else in the production team, it was kind of fitting in that model of how do we get the viewer leaning in? What can we add to the golf coverage? What do we take away that's currently being, I guess, broadcast? I mean, David's thing was golf coverage, aside from maybe the shot tracer, hasn't changed in the last 30 years for the most part. So we were lucky in that we had that kind of, I guess, clay to play with. Whereas other sports that have probably moved a lot further when it comes to changing how the sport's covered, you don't have that same privilege.
How has working in other sports, cricket and tennis and other entities, how has that impacted you as leading production in golf? Just having other sports on your mind and how they go about and how you have gone about producing television that way and using that to sort of model or at least glean intel from in what you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been hugely important. I think I'm really lucky in that I've had the exposure to, say, Cricket World Cups. I mean, cricket is a very different sport to produce in that the gaps that you're filling are entirely different to golf, entirely different to tennis. I mean, I've told many people golf is by far the hardest sport to produce because, it's like playing Tetris drunk with a blindfold on, trying to make things fit, pay off stories, get back to a story that you haven't paid off. Whereas more linear flowing sports like cricket and tennis, you know what's coming up next. You can adapt to that. You can try to preempt it. Golf, particularly live golf. I mean, we've got, with the shotgun start, with 60 cameras out on the course, we've got two different concurrent formats running at any given time, an individual format and a team format. The story can very, very rapidly move, and the production has to move with it. So I think I've been lucky in that things that I've seen and learned working on cricket, things that I've seen and learned working on tennis, have then transferred to some of the things we've brought to live golf. I mean, we modeled ourselves quite a bit off F1, which obviously David Hill's involved with. But tennis, I spent 4 years working on the Australian Open here, and the idea of having 20 plus courts all feeding into one central production, and then when you're working on a world feed, picking which stories you want to go to, which you want to update, and which you want to show live. That's kind of how we approach live golf. What stories do we want to be on live? How do we get live as much as possible? And then how do we condense the rest of the stories into little bite-sized updates, which keeps the pace of the show going, but then allows the viewer to kind of see the players they want to see the best golf shots on the course without necessarily spending, as some coverages do, 5 minutes on the green watching a player line up a putt, pick their nose, talk to their caddy,
Yes.
change clubs, debate it, go back and putt. I mean, we really feel like you can get 7 or 8 or 9 stories in that time and not take away from the drama of that moment. So yeah, I think it's been hugely important.
How important was the way you grew up in fortifying? When I look at you, James, I see a guy who is adventurous and who is up for any challenge. Those two themes, how did they show themselves before you were in college, before you went the media route, where I'm going to see the young version of James and I'm going to say, this guy is up for challenges. He is adventurous and he likes to have fun.
Gosh, we're really diving deep here.
Yes.
Yeah, look, I think I was really lucky when I was young. I was encouraged to do as many things as possible and experience as many different parts of life, whether it's music or sport. So I think my upbringing was probably had a lot to do with that. And then the love of television just came from sitting watching TV with my dad. I mean, one of my earlier golf memories, I don't think I've had the courage to say this to Greg just yet, but was watching Greg Norman going head to head with Nick Faldo on the Sunday in the Masters. I mean, I was kept home from school sick that day because my dad was all over the fact that the two of us were going to watch Greg, win a green jacket, and that's one of the earliest memories I've got of staying home from school to watch that. And I think, yeah, it definitely came from my upbringing and the way that my parents shaped my childhood for sure.
When you were a child and you were watching Greg, and then if somebody could look into the future and tell you, even when you were young, that one day you would be crossing paths professionally with Greg, the younger version of you sitting, let's say, on the couch with your dad, watching Greg and admiring him, what would have your reaction been?
I would have been blown away. I mean, they say don't meet your heroes. I've got to say, and I'm not just saying this because he's our CEO, but he really does exceed expectations in that he's a genuine person that cares about people and he was really involved in the production process, particularly early on with us, having an understanding of not only how businesses run, but I think he took his experiences at Fox in the year that he did with them for better or worse and had very direct feedback on as an announcer what worked for him and what he saw and what he would like to see in a TV coverage. And I think having a CEO that understands not only how a business is run, not only understands golf, but then understands broadcasting and has lived it was hugely beneficial for us when it came to getting support in how we wanted to shape the coverage. Because he was able to say, yeah, I've been there, I've seen that, and that drove me nuts too, buddy. It's something that he'd, often say when we'd bring things up.
To see it all come full circle with you, I can't even imagine. There might not be words. You described it there in bits and pieces, but to be able to meet your idol, not many people get to do that, let alone get to work with their idols. James Watson is with me, SVP Worldwide Production, LIV Golf. Your team is incredible, and all of these bright minds. How does everybody impart their knowledge and clever skill sets into making this whole thing work? It's the experiences that you have that all of you bring together allow for such a unique set of circumstances and a homeostasis of knowledge of people coming from different backgrounds, and having that out, that diversity of thought, how does that really influence the fabric of the brand of LIV and where it's going and what it has already done?
Think it's everything. I mean, our chief media officer, Will Steger, who hired us all, said from the outset, he doesn't have a golf background. When he hired me, he said, I'm not a golf expert. I've obviously been he's been in broadcast for his entire career. He's helped hire teams, shape shows, but live golf was not his wheelhouse. So when he hired us all, it was, listen, you guys are being hired for a reason, and here's the environment for you to do your job and express yourself. And I think we've tried to impart that with everyone we've brought on. I mean, the people that have had a huge impact on not only LIV Golf, but the production. I mean, Jeremy Krug, a guy at LIV Golf, has an architecture background, is responsible for the build outs on site, the fantastic black and white look and feel that you see when you go to site. And for any person who hasn't been to a LIV event, I encourage you to do so. I've never met anyone that hasn't had fun at a LIV event, but that very eye-catching look and feel came from a guy with an architecture background who had a very clear vision for how golf should be different and how it should be branded. Our creative director, Will Newell, I'm pretty sure probably has watched maybe an hour's worth of golf in his life, but came up with the graphics package, the look and feel that you see on air when you watch our product. And his way of approaching things was, as a non-golf fan, am I going to understand this? He didn't come from it with a background of, this is how a golf graphics package should be. Here's where the shot graphics should go. This is where the scorecard should be. He approached it and, well, where does this make the most sense? Is it going to kind of pop off the screen? And is a layman going to understand it in the same way as a golf expert? So having Will Newell at the table, Keith Hirschland at the table, Steve Bime at the table, there are a lot of people who were involved in LIV's production set up at an early stage that brought their own experiences, and Will kind of gave us the ability to express ourselves without having to worry about, this idea is going to get shot down, that's not going to work. It was very, very free flowing, and it still is.
Free flowing in the sense of, you're on site for an event. How early do you get to the event? And then all of the moving pieces, all of the cameras, all of the towers, all the places you need to be in and get set up. For people who don't understand, as you said, golf and setting up a broadcast is unlike anything else. It's more extravagant. There's a whole lot going on. From that perspective, what does that lead up to an event? What has it look like for you guys?
It's incredibly important, just with the sheer size of the crew that we've got, briefing everyone on not only the storylines for the week, but the key changes we've brought on, is just a huge part of the production. We've rolled out at least one new innovation, I think, every single week since we started. We have a kind of a leadership team at LIV and investors who want to see innovation in the golf broadcast and on the kind of event front. So keeping people abreast of that, announcers, producers, ISO producers, has been really important. And I think, again, passing down that mantra of everyone being a producer, everyone having ideas, making sure that the people on site, if they see something, if they want to push something, sell something, they have the freedom and ability to do so. And a lot of that is done in the lead up, whether it's a camera position, whether it's a new graphic idea, whether it's a way to use the drone on a specific hole. We've got an innovation producer, Eric Saperstein, who spends a lot of time focusing on which holes are going to be key. How do we best show the line that Bryson's going to take off the tee versus everyone else in the field? And then having that go to the director working out how to cover it, working with the drone team, working with the graphics team. So the lead up to each week at each different golf course ends up being its own production before you even get on air.
And the golfers, what I loved was when Bryson shot a 58, and obviously it was the first time he had won an event since his father had passed, and a really great job on your front in your team in canvassing that emotion post round when he has the 58 and everybody is celebrating. Where do you pick and choose? There's all kinds of different, and I was talking to Keith about this. There's ways to throw in stories when you have a shotgun start. It's a little bit where you have to pick and choose, just because there's always constant action. But when you have a story that evokes that much emotion, how do you like to canvas that in your broadcast?
Yeah, I mean, Keith and I have very different roles in that I really see myself as needing to be at 30,000 feet and not get too bogged down in the nitty gritty of what stories we're telling and why. But if we see something, if we have a package that needs to go in, if I'm seeing something like that, I mean, where we need to slow down, I'll definitely get in his ear and tell him. But I mean, on that occasion, Keith is so hugely experienced that the guys, everyone in the truck knew what the story was, and they knew to slow down and focus on it. And then it just became, okay, what do I absolutely need? And it's something you hear Keith say in the truck time and time again. Do I need this? Do I need this? Something that your listeners may not understand is just how we've changed how the golf truck works. Usually, traditionally, you've got your producer making all the decisions. You've got the director worrying about what cameras to cut to once those decisions are made. And as the producer driving the storytelling for us, with so many golf shots, we've got 3 separate ISO producers all selling stories. We've got a super spotter selling where to get to live on the individual leaderboard. We've got another super spotter selling the team stories to get to live. So everyone in the truck is working to sell Keith stories to tell, and it's his job to filter and say no. So when he's in there saying, do I need it? He's really asking, is this for the lead? Because if it isn't for the lead on the team scoreboard, the team pylon, and it's not for the lead on the individual pylon, I don't care about it, because my focus right now is Bryson's 58. And that's the story we want to tell. And the announcers know that. Arlo knows to go big when something big happens. Dom out on the course is following it, or Suan if she's following it. That all comes from the top, but it comes from the top because we've got great people underneath Keith filtering what he absolutely needs to make sure that he can drop everything and focus on the now, or say, you know what, the 58's gone. He's got a 5-shot lead. I'm now going to worry about the range goats who are chasing the crushers for the team title, or Torquay in this case.
That's so interesting you brought that up, because there are different layers of storytelling. There's the individual, but then the team aspect. And then it's hard to probably prioritize because there are all sorts of different stories coming in. So how does your team say, okay, we have a broadcast window, we want to be able to do this and do that and try to get everything in, when you have the team aspect and the individual aspect?
Yeah, I mean, but that's the beauty of what we get to do. We're storytellers for a living, so it's being prepared for as many of those stories as you can be prepared for, and then the best producers in the world can immediately jettison all that preparation and say, we need to focus on this right now because this is what the viewer needs to see, and we're going to make that as dramatic as possible. And then you're going to have days where you need all those stories. And I think one of the great things about LIV Golf is the ability for those stories to be there on Sunday. I think as a golf fan, one of the things I hated the most was seeing Tiger or Phil with a 7-shot lead on Sunday and just sitting on that player. You know what the outcome's going to be. Nothing's going to change. And it feels like it's a fait accompli. You're just waiting for the payoff in 4 hours' time, and you may fall asleep on the couch while you're doing it. We don't have that, because Phil or Sergio or Bubba or any of these star players, Brooks, DJ, that we've got, they may not be in contention on Sunday, and the individual leader may have a 5-shot lead. But I tell you what, that team leaderboard is probably going to be tight, and they're going to be counting for their team. So if you've had 2 bad rounds, it resets on Sunday for the team scoring. You can go 5 under and get your team the win. And I think those are the compelling stories that we know we can hit if the other side of it's not paying off. So having all those different dynamics, having features to roll in, it's being prepared for, I guess, a worst case scenario on what you're covering. And then, as you said before, when you see a Bryson moment come, throwing all of that out and saying, this is going to be our focus now, and everything else we're just going to condense into a little update.
The best part of what you all do is, as you said, the best in those situations, they can have all of this planned material, and then something like that comes, and to be able to pivot as fast as you all do is incredible. I got one more question for you here, and James Watson is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. When you have the ability to, as you said, it's a very immersive experience watching. When we grew up, and as if Tiger had, like you said, a 7-stroke lead, and we know the inevitable is going to happen, he's going to win. The focus is on him, but we lose sight of the other players that have incredible stories of overcoming something that aren't really told. when the players with LIV know that even if they're not at the top of the leaderboard, but they're going to be acknowledged, that there are going to be cameras and attention on them stylistically as a broadcast. How do the players tell you afterwards how much they appreciate that, that you're finding and you're giving them space on top of, say, the front runner in a tournament?
Yeah, I think the players do appreciate it. I think as a golf fan watching at home as a kid, I used to get frustrated not being able to see the Australians in a PGA Tour tournament, even if they're in the top 10, because we're focused on the top three. And seeing Adam Scott, seeing Steve Elkington at seventh and not seeing a shot of them was one of the reasons we came up with this whole don't blink concept, which was a little bit of me, a little bit of Keith. We had this idea where we said, how do we take all the best shots that don't matter, condense them into a package so that the viewer still sees it, but not go over to a player at five over par on the third tee, and everyone in the world goes, oh, I wonder why they're going out here. We wanted to make sure that every player was going to get shown every day at least one shot of them, and all their best shots were going to get showcased. So this idea of taking that, condensing it into a package, making a shot that usually takes 25 seconds or 40 seconds, condense it down into 8 seconds, get 6 or 7 shots away every 10 minutes, that we felt it was going to give us more time to focus on the live, more time to focus on those key stories. And then when the players watch it and they hear feedback, yeah, I mean, we had Travis Smythe come up to us in year one. He hit a great shot. I think he was 3 or 4 over, well out of contention, but on a par 3, hit a shot to an inch, and everyone back home saw that shot. And I do think the players appreciate that. I know their sponsors appreciate that we're not the coverage that's only going to focus on the star players or is only going to focus on the leader. We make sure that the best golf shots get shown. And again, I can't praise Keith enough, but he just does a fantastic job of, when he sold those stories, making sure that they get in there when appropriate.
Your team as a whole absolutely dominates in that space. And as we wrap up this conversation, mentioning here the inclusion of golfers, no matter where they stand in the leaderboard, in the fact that they're getting their time in the spotlight, and it correlates to the fans. They feel the vibe of LIV Golf, that they're included, no matter where they're from, where they live, what knowledge of the sport they might have or not. It is an open party in a sense. It's very welcoming from the player standpoint in broadcasting, but then as the fans who come to these events, and you're channeling into a added audience that might not have been there before. And that's what makes you all so fantastic, and why I love the opportunity, James, to have you on. James Watson, SVP, LIV Golf Production. I'm Bryan Fenley. Really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, Brian. It was great.